Welcome to Nepal Now. My name is Marty Logan. Last Saturday, 2 trucks carrying smuggled fertilizer across the southern border between India and Nepal were seized at Nepal customs. Police took charge and were escorting the trucks to the capital Kathmandu when they were blocked on the highway by desperate farmers in Dhading district, who seized 400 of the 500 bags of fertilizer and vanished, reported the Kathmandu Post. Fertilizer shortages are a perennial issue in Nepal. This year, the Russian attack on Ukraine has caused a global shortage, possibly worsening the situation here. Also, the monsoon came early, so the fertilizer was needed sooner than usual because farmers were ready to plant rice in their waterlogged fields earlier than in most years. A day after the truck hijacking, some farmers started planting without fertilizer, hoping for the best, again reported the Post. Those events symbolize the state of agriculture in Nepal today. Dependent on external inputs, the country's food supply is at the whim of events outside of its border. So when calamities hit, like the invasion of Ukraine and the COVID-19 pandemic, alarm bells ring. On top of that, much agriculture land is unused as hundreds of thousands of potential farmers seek greener pastures working as migrant laborers in India, Malaysia, and Persian Gulf countries. Finally, climate change is scrambling weather patterns and generating many more extreme weather events, like drought and torrential rainfall, which endanger crops. Once a rice exporter, today Nepal depends on imports to feed its nearly 30 million people. In its recent budget, the government, like many before it, pledged to revive agriculture. Led by mechanization and improved seeds, the country will boost rice production 3 times and cut overall food imports by 1/3, it promised. Today's guest, development policy expert Jagannath Adhikari, is skeptical of the promises. He says that Nepal should be focusing on rebooting traditional family farming, in part so it generates enough food to feed the growing number of urban dwellers, but also so growers can earn the increased amount of cash required by today's farming families. Please listen now to my chat with Jagannath Adhikari. Jagannath Adhikari, welcome to Nepal Now podcast.
Thank you, Marty. I'm very happy to discuss this important issue with you today.
So this issue is one that people have been talking about for years now, but it seems to have become even more urgent with all sorts of international developments. We have global food shortages because of the war. There's always seems to be annually a lack of pesticides for agriculture in Nepal. And of course, everyone knows that now we've become a net importer of food rather than an exporter. There's been for years, if not decades, this growing amount of unused agricultural land. So now would definitely seem to be the time to do something to reboot agriculture in this country. Are there any signs that we're turning back in that direction? For example, was there anything in the recent budget that just came out?
Yeah, that's very important questions because we have been discussing about it for some time. Yeah, agriculture as a profession, as a source of food, has been declining, and so there has been a lot of concern about it. And as you said, the concern has heightened right now in Nepal specifically, and also globally because the food crisis is going to happen soon if the present situation continues. With this war and disruption in supply chain, I think the crisis will deepen. And the thing is, this has given an opportunity to think about not only about how to produce more, like for example, Nepal needs to produce more, but also it has given a reason to think about how to produce. Whether production in Russia or America would be good enough for poor countries like Africa or poor countries like Nepal. Many countries are in the shortage of fertilizer, I was amazed that how many countries are dependent on Russia for fertilizer. So it is another kind of dependency, and this war happened, and then we came to know much more about it. How poorer countries, developing countries, are dependent on all those chemical fertilizers on food produced at the industrial scale. The other side of the coin is this kind of food supply or agricultural input supplied over a huge distance. Is it good for the climate? When you supply things from one corner of the world to another, especially food, that requires a lot of fossil fuel. So I think it has given a cause for rethink about what kind of agriculture should be promoted. Nepal depends on external inputs like fertilizers, pesticides, even seeds. Seeds dependence has grown a lot nowadays. And obviously with international aviation trade, disasters like this, that will impact Nepal because we won't get enough inputs. So there is a need to increase food production, obviously, and there is also a need to kind of bring a shift on how to produce it within Nepal. With the present budget, that they have given some slogans on producing more and producing within Nepal, becoming self-sufficient to some extent. Well, I don't know, but the activities, the programs they have suggested, I mean, it's not going to change the situation. So I can give you the specific examples for that. But my feeling is that it's not a different kind of a budget than the previous budgets. And they say they give a lot of priority on agriculture in this budget. In terms of money to be spent on agriculture, it's not a different kind of budget than the previous one. Like they have allocated $56 billion, Nepali rupees on this one, which is like 2.5% of the total budget. It's not much. So it used to be very high in the 70s and in the 70s and early 80s. And with the adoption of the type of neoliberal, what we call neoliberal policies and deregulation, so all the budget on agriculture has been reduced, not only by the government of Nepal, but by the donor agencies, and it came down to like 2.2%, 2.5%. Out of this 56 billion rupees, they have allocated 15 billion rupees for import of fertilizer. Just for fertilizer. Yeah, there are funds for Prime Minister's agricultural grant, 6 billion, and then 10 billion for agricultural reform. And because much of the budget will go for salaries and other things, running cost of the bureaucracy, most of the budget goes for that, agricultural budget. So there's no much budget for farmers as such who are doing, except for a little bit of subsidy in the fertilizer. The rest is not used for the production itself. So all these slogans like that the country, I mean, they will reduce import of food by 30% in a year. It's just a slogan. How it will be achieved is not being described.
Right. Yeah. I mean, budgets in general are full of slogans on all sorts of topics and issues. So I guess agriculture gets treated the same. But to be serious about it, so it's really a business as usual budget when it comes to agriculture, fundamentally being part of this global agricultural trading system where you're bringing in inputs and perhaps exporting some outputs. You talked about seed, fertilizer, etc. That's not changing, and the government doesn't have a vision for it to change. I read a couple of your articles on the records, the website of the Record, which were really interesting and talked in more detail than we can talk about here about agriculture and some possible remedies to the existing system. And if I can characterize it very briefly, it is looking back on the previous subsistence, family oriented type of agriculture, but kind of boosting it so that production goes beyond just producing enough for a family. So if I understood what you and one of your colleagues were suggesting, it's going back to that traditional system, but making some changes so that we're producing enough to provide for people who themselves cannot produce. Is that a fairly accurate way of, and simplified way of describing what you would be advocating to change the system, to improve the system?
Yes. I mean, that's what our vision is. That's what we advocate. I'm fortunate in a way that I have this perspective. I can give a perspective because I grew up in a self-sufficient kind of a peasant farming. In the sense, I mean, the land was just enough to meet our family requirements, but it was a fairly self-sufficient farming system. I grew up and worked there until I went out of home for education and jobs and other things. So that I compare with what I studied about Green Revolution. I studied Green Revolution in India, in Punjab, which is considered as a very successful case of food production was increased because of like monocropping and few crops, wheat and rice, mainly wheat and some rice. And then it's all based on fossil fuels supplied in terms of fertilizer, pesticides, and this and that. So to me, the family-oriented subsistence farming system is basically, as a system, is a very self-contained system. It didn't depend on external inputs. It didn't depend on like chemical inputs. Fertilizer manure was produced within the farm. Animals were there. So it was a combination of animal and crops. And there's a diversity of crops. There's so many varieties of just a single crop like paddy. We used to have, 10, 12 varieties. Suitable for dry land, suitable for waterlogged land, suitable for that location, suitable for that location, producing some food for the festivals, very fragrant rice. Some rice were produced for medicinal use. So there's so many types of rice. And these are human needs, animal needs, as well as for the rituals and cultural needs. So catering all those needs. So you need a diversity of varieties and diversity of crops and self-sufficiency. Yeah, that's the only weakness on that system was that we needed to produce more food because population has grown and there are many people staying in urban areas now. They don't do farming, so we have to cater them. Yeah, and that's the need. So we have to do something within the system, not destroying the system, improving each and every element of the system and produce more food. And that way, I think the present global problems like climate change, agriculture would not contribute to climate change because food was consumed, produced within the local area, consumed within a local area. There were exchanges, of course. One single area can't produce all the foods, but they were limited to a kind of regional towns or within a region, within a bioregion. So that is what is always in my mind. And with the knowledge of new technological knowledge, plant breeding, nutrition, soil nutrition and other things, I think if we can improve various elements of subsistence farming system, present way of farming, and increase production, I think that would be very ideal for Nepal. And the present budget doesn't think this way. So even the target, like even if you think that the present system is right, then even they haven't done enough homework on how to, like, for example, reduce import by 30%. So how to do it? There's no any specific program that will produce that result. So it's all ad hoc, and if we do this, present the same system, then even if we produce more food, we'll be importing many things. and then we'll be importing more fertilizers, more pesticides, more hybrid seeds, and the money goes out again. So what's the point of becoming self-sufficient in food, independent in food? Take for example Chiton. I've been to Chiton many times. And yeah, it's good. It's in poultry production, but on the other hand, the feed they feed, it's all depend on external market. They get grains, they get other things from India and other places. So even though we have a kind of a self-sufficient in poultry, I'm not sure whether it is really self-sufficient or not, but we have improved production. But the dependency is still there because we are producing based on imported feed, imported medicine. So that's the danger I see.
Right, right. And it does seem to be this existing system does seem to be one that's very fragile. And I suppose you can say this now about a lot of aspects of our global lives, but that doesn't make it any better. You know, the fact that this conflict in Europe that's happening now can have an impact on, you know, whether or not we get the food that we think we require. And maybe that's a bigger question because we are such a globalized world now. But it's certainly something to ponder. I was looking at another article that was written on the Record website. This is from 2017, and it talks about, again, you know, finding a balance between the old and the new, so you're creating a form of sustainable agriculture. And it describes this improved version of traditional agriculture. And it says sustainable integrated organic food production focused on building soil fertility, increasing adaptability to climate changes by diversifying resilient crops like local grains and perennial vegetables. Farmers can also bring income by integrating high value, marketable crops like fruit and nut trees and cash crops, cardamom, tea, coffee, spices, hardwoods, by using local natural resources to produce value added goods, or by starting production for things like mushrooms and herbal medicinal products. That sounds very good, but it also sounds a bit complicated. Is this something that, let's say the will was there, let's say that we did have the political will to do this. I mean, is that something that could happen, say, in a few years or 5 years, or would it take 10 years to actually be able to get Nepal on the track to be self-sufficient in agriculture?
So I feel that if there is a political will, this can be achievable because there is a kind of a cultural asset in the society, because Nepali society, like my generation, still have that knowledge of the traditional system. They know how to grow crops, like my children won't know now. So until my generation, I think we can grow those crops. Yeah, that's one way to go ahead to increase farmers' production. Given that the farm size is very small in Nepal, we need to combine all those cash crops, which has a lot of market. And from a climate change perspective too, diversified cropping of these types are very good to reduce greenhouse emission, and also for people's health. These are considered very important nowadays. Local food, traditional crops are now called the climate smart food because they are useful in this sense. And the system, the government promoting now the modern system, as you said, it's very fragile. If something happens in the global order, whether political or natural disaster, what you call the present conflict taking place is a political disaster, but there could be natural disaster. There could be famine, there could be this, there could be that. When COVID happened, all the supply chains disturbed. And I tell you that I have an experience of trade blockade in 1990, and also later on in 2015, and when COVID happened. The problem is in 1990, I was doing my research. I was in Pokhara area, so we didn't notice that there was a blockade. In a way, yeah, there was a blockade. I know for 9 or 10 months from India, that's political region, but we didn't notice anything. There's no food shortage. There's not much transportation at that time, so diesel, petrol was not required. People either walked or cycle and this and that. And farming was all based on local resources. Then those people just didn't notice about whether there's a blockade or not. In 2015, within a short time, there was a hue and cry, and Kathmandu was badly affected, and other towns too badly affected. And when COVID happened, there was a lot of issues that came up. Because Nepal had totally become dependent on food. I don't mean that we have to disconnect from the global order, from the global supply chain, global trade, just to make farming sustainable. But the only thing is, since it relates to food, which we need every day, some sort of security is important. That's what I mean. It's not like other commodities, clothes and other things. Yeah, we can stop for a year. So in that sense, I think we should not treat food like other commodities. Every day we need food. We take it into our body, so it means it has some consequences on our body, our health, and also it is very valuable culturally, socially, and other things. Yeah, so I think the only sad part is like food and agriculture is taken as just like any other industry. I think it's not just like any other commodity. Food has many dimensions.
Yeah, that certainly resonates, and I'm glad you mentioned these terms, culture and society, because I was already thinking about this in terms of agricultural people themselves, or rural-based people, and the decisions they're making. Obviously, a lot of them over the last couple of decades have been leaving the farm, and that is partly an economic decision, but I think it goes beyond that as well. So, we certainly need to ask the question, do people want to farm anymore? I mean, no, I don't think any farmers would say it's an easy thing to do. You can certainly argue that it may be satisfying, it may be important, like you mentioned, in terms of culture, society. But that certainly is, something you need to bring into the discussion. And I think another aspect of this, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a younger person in their 20s or 30s, and they may listen to us talking about the family farm, the traditional family farm, and think of it as this really quaint idea. It's an ideal situation. It sounds great. And even they themselves might go back and visit the village once in a while and see their grandparents still there. But they don't see that as part of the food they consume. And I know this might seem like a trivial kind of side issue, but maybe it's more important than that. I mean, maybe as a nation, you need still to have that ideal of yourself as a food producing, as an agricultural country. But once you lose that, it's really hard to generate political will. I mean, maybe even the politicians have lost it, and therefore it's hard to get the political will to actually focus and say, this is really important that we take a serious look at how we're doing this now.
Yeah, absolutely right. Thinking about farmers, especially from their one perspective, and also from young people, and who are exposed to so many things of the outside world. They have seen in the TV, in the YouTube, this and that, and so they are attracted to the cities and other places. And also that, farming, family farming, hasn't been able to attract or provide enough economic rewards for the young people, who are needing more and more income because their requirements have grown. I mean, present day generation, they need a lot of money now. They need to buy a mobile, they have to recharge it frequently. They have seen stuff in the market and they want to have it, and the fashions come, there are TV, this and that. So they need more money nowadays, and the parents have to spend money for their education. Boarding school is becoming a fashion, and they have to have the high fee. So I mean, the cash requirement has really increased in the farm household nowadays. And so they have to produce more income, and then the family farming system hasn't been able to kind of generate enough income. So, and farming life as a whole is very difficult. We all know it. And there are many risks because farmer has to kind of struggle with nature, and there are disasters, there are insects, there are pests. Sometimes you can grow crops, sometimes they are damaged. So there are so many risks in farming. And so it is a very difficult life, of course. But if you want people stay in the farm, this has to be discussed at the national level, in our urban areas even. I'm frustrated in Kathmandu because people don't like to discuss about farming. They want to discuss about new things, new jargons, new political theories, and this and that, but never discuss this issue. They thought these are trivial. These are rural. Whereas the food they are eating, they don't think about it. Where it's produced, how it is produced, what is the life of the farmers, the food they are getting from, whether they should care for the farmers or not. So these are not urban issues yet in Nepal. So as a nation, I think the government politician should think about it seriously and give more incentive to farmer. In Pokhara area, I'm practically doing many works there. And also we are promoting kind of why not combine farming and homestay tourism, ecotourism. These small farming households will be doing family farming for generation of income. They need to do some other enterprises as well, like ecotourism, homestay, spice production, this boutique production type of thing. Yeah, and frankly, the future is there, I know, like organic farming, and then a feeling of like healing when you stay in a village where it is totally organic, herbs are grown, food is fresh, and then the people trek here and there and give a very healing feeling that will attract many tourists, domestic as well as international. That will also give more income to farmers. It is a slow process, but ultimately, that is the future for human health, for the total environmental conservation, including the climate change. That is the future. Even though I don't know how far we'll do it now, or for the people to realize it, because unless they are not in crisis, they won't realize it, because many people are not proactive. They won't understand this thing, especially among politicians. They think about next year election. They don't think about 10 years down the line how the things will be.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it is going to take a long time to transition. It's not going to happen overnight, even if you do have the political will. Pardon my pun, but it will have to be a grassroots kind of thing. But anyway, I'm really glad that I had a chance to talk to you today. We really only touched on these issues because they are so complex and broad. So it would be nice to maybe have another conversation another time. But for now, I think that's a good introduction, and hopefully we'll get people thinking about, where the food is coming from and whether or not the entire system is sustainable. And if we can really start to make just some steps towards a more sustainable future for our food system. So Jagannath, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and speaking with me today.
Thank you so much, giving an opportunity.
Thanks again to Jagannath Adhikari for talking to us about reforming farming in Nepal. Check out links to more information in the resources section of this episode. If you liked what you heard, make sure that you subscribe to Nepal Now on your favorite podcast app. Keep updated between episodes by following us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We're at Nepal Now or at Nepal Now Pod. I'm Marty Logan. I'll talk to you again soon.